Hello and welcome to the Belonging Chapter. Today we are joined by Lynne Gadsden, who has had an incredible career within the independent financial advisory world to become a chartered financial planner. That's a real tongue twister. We are delighted to talk about the career path she has taken and forged the way for other women in the industry.
Today, sitting here with her, she's now looking ahead, going, what is next? Whether it be developing hobbies or even writing a book. And we are incredibly excited to see what is next for her.
Enjoy the episode. Lynne, we are so excited to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us on the Belonging Chapter.
Thank you for asking me. I'm
Not at all.
slightly nervous. Haven't done one of these before, but let's see how it goes.
Brilliant. We would love to hear your story from the beginning. So how did school look for you? What was the path after leaving school? And how did you end up starting your own business?
Okay, gosh, it's a long one because I've been doing it a long time. So, went to a not very good comprehensive back in the 80s. Not great at all. Told I'd fail all my O levels. Told I'd fail all my A levels because I chatted in class, which has turned out to be quite useful. Chatting, chatted in class too much. Probably didn't pay much attention, but actually was quite bright and did really, really well. But by then they said, "Oh well, no, you haven't got enough to go to university." So I got rejected from 5 universities and 4 polytechnics. Massive, awful when you're 18 and you've just been told all of that. But so therefore I didn't go to university. I thought, well, and then they said, "Oh, you can go to a clearing." I was like, "No, I've had enough of education. I don't want to go to a clearing." So I didn't know what to do. My mum said, "You need to have some skills." So sent me off to a PA college. So I did the highest PA diploma, secretarial college it was called in those days. And so I did, yes, the PA course at the time, which you had to have A levels for. So it was very high end. And then I became a secretary for a few years, but my heart wasn't in it really. And then one of our friends worked for Prudential, who were an insurance company at the time, and he was a financial advisor for them. And his boss met me in a pub. We were out having a drink, and he said, "You'd be really good at this job." And I was 21. I was like, no. And at that time, you had to go around and collect money at the door. In the old days at Prudential, you had to collect money at the door. And I was like, I'm not going around collecting money at the door. So I said, no. And then anyway, a few years later, an advert came up in the in local newspaper. And my husband at the time, my ex-husband now, but my husband at the time said, "Oh, look, they're advertising for a financial consultant with Prudential. You ought to go for it." So I said, "Oh," and he said, "You're really bored at what you're with your job." And I was like, "Oh, am I? Okay, I'll go." And I went, and it was the same guy who'd seen me in a pub years before, and I basically got the job there and then on the doorstep. But I'd never done anything like that, so it was a complete and utter change from. We were employed, but going from being a secretary 9 to 5 to suddenly working all the hours, and as one of very few women. So when I joined, there were 6,000 advisors in Prudential alone. I think there was 250,000 advisors in the country, but there's only 9% of women. So every time I went into a meeting, I was the only woman, every time. But I didn't mind it. I quite liked being around blokes. They're easygoing, and I just became one of them. But my client, I've then started seeing clients, and they liked having a woman. Even though I was 23, so
Wow.
really young,
Yeah.
and sitting in front of 50-year-old men with them thinking, what on earth does this young woman know? But I knew what I was talking about, so I then talked to them, and you could see them go, "Oh, okay, she does know what she's talking about," and so it carried on. But I found a job that I was probably made for without knowing about it. People think financial advice is about numbers and figures and performance. It's not. That's important, but it's about people. It's about talking to people, getting their trust and helping them. And I always wanted to help people. And so, people used to say, "Well, why has it been so good?" And I said, "Well, I like chatting, as you can see. As I got told off at school, I like chatting. I like being nosy. I got to go to people's houses and look around people's houses. Got to get to know people and help them generally. And I quite like money, and talking about that. So within I think within a year, I was in the top 5% in the country, and got one of the top awards and got sent on a cruise ship. I was 25, standing on the deck of a cruise ship, watching my name go up on a roll of honour, and just was like, oh my word, this is it. And so I completely fell into it, but it just became a job that I absolutely loved, and I still do. So yeah. So there we go. Bit of a long-winded story about how I got into it.
I just think that's so incredible.
And I think the message there is if you're told you can't do something at school, don't take any notice, because, if I'd listened to my teachers, I would not have done as well as I've done. I would have just put my head down, not work, but instead I got my O levels, really good grades, got my A levels, really good grades, chose not to go to university. And I actually believe university is not the right thing for everybody as well, and I've done far better than my friends that went to university. So yeah, there we go.
How fascinating. And it's just amazing that you fell into something by fluke. And I'm a massive believer of everything happens for a reason. And you met that guy the first time, said, no, not now. The advert came up, and then you went for it again, and it was him. And, it was obviously your destiny, wasn't it? That's what you were meant to do.
Yeah. And people say, oh, you've been really lucky. And I haven't. I've worked really hard for what I've got. But I was lucky that I found a job that was so suited to me, and I didn't know it was so suited to me. There's a huge shortfall of female financial advisors, and I'm a massive, and financial advisors in general. There's about 50,000. They need another 50,000 advisors. The average age of a financial advisor is 58 at the moment, and they are all going to retire.
And there's no
so they need younger people coming in.
Yeah.
So there's a huge shortfall, and still now it was 9% when I started. It's only about 18%, I believe, who are female.
Small.
And yet we're really good with people. We're much more empathetic. People trust us perhaps a little bit more sometimes. I mean, it's great for male financial advisors, but I just feel people open up a bit more. And clients, particularly when I deal with female clients, seem to just relax a bit more when they're talking to me. So so it's a huge, and you don't have to go to university to get into it, and you don't, you can come into it later in your life. So it's a big industry that isn't talked about at school. They don't talk about it. They really, really desperately need to have, I believe, it taught as an A level. So if they did financial planning as an A level, one, it would teach kids about money, because nobody gets any help about that.
No.
You leave university, what's a mortgage? What's a credit card?
And you're in loads of debt that you probably don't really understand how you've got into it, but it's like what you're told to do.
Yeah. And so I'm a massive advocate for giving financial education to kids. But it's really hard. People are told about accountancy and law at school as a career. They're not told financial planning is a thing.
No.
And yet it's a massive thing. It won't be that. There's little bits with AI coming in where report writing will be done, but you can't beat the face-to-face conversation between somebody. And therefore it's a huge industry that's not spoken about. And if they had an A-level, people would learn, and then they could decide whether they wanted to carry that on as a career, and it would help towards the qualifications you need, because you obviously have to have qualifications to become an advisor, and they're getting them. It's tough. That is tough, but it would help towards those as well. So anyway, so I write a lot on LinkedIn about that sort of thing. So because me and some of the older members of this industry are trying to get younger people into it.
Yeah. So you're at Prudential, you're flying high, you're on a cruise ship, your name's up on the in bright lights, and then what happened from there? So at what point did you?
So it went really well. I mean, I was really successful. So I was they used to have something called the Premier Club, which was the top 50 advisors in the whole country. So there was 6,000 Prudential advisors. So it was the top 50 of them were in the Premier Club. They were all men apart from me. So I think I was 21st or something in the country at one point, and I was 26, 27,
so young.
Probably. Yeah, really. Yeah. And it was amazing. And I loved it. And I did lots of things, went to lots of places, went to lots of war. It was really, really wonderful. And then I ran into a brick wall, and I'd had glandular fever when I was doing my O levels. Got it again when I was in my late 20s, and it then turned into ME, so chronic fatigue syndrome. So we know each other. You probably don't even know that.
I had no idea about that. No.
So it was a long time ago. But yeah, so, and I remember I was setting up a pension scheme at a local care home, and I was talking to the owner there, and I was feeling really ill. And she started telling me that she'd had ME, and nobody knew what. I mean, there was no internet, so you didn't pick up things from you couldn't Google what things were in those days. So I was like, oh, and she said, I said, well, what's that? And she started telling me all her symptoms, and I was like, oh my word, it's like a tick list. And I said, that's what I feel like at the moment. She said, do you really? And she started talking to me. I said, yeah. She said, right. And she phoned my doctor and got me an appointment. I went straight from there to my doctor, and he signed me off for 3 months, and then said, right, that's it, you're not working. So I was probably, it then just really hit me, and I was in bed. It's like having long-term flu. So it's chronic fatigue syndrome. So what people know, that it's post-viral fatigue syndrome. Long COVID is in effect. So now it's talked about a bit more because of long COVID. It used to be called yuppie flu back in the day, which is, they used to say, well, people just don't want to work. Absolute nonsense. I mean, don't start me on that. But I was probably bedbound for about 3 months and couldn't get out of bed. I'd get up, go downstairs, make a cup of tea, come back, and that would be it. That's all I could do. I had long hair, and if I dried my hair, I had to lie down for 3 hours afterwards. So I had all my hair cut off into a crop, and it was bad. So it was 3 months like that. I was probably housebound for about 6 months, so I couldn't really leave the house, which was all a real challenge, as you can imagine. I was one of these complete and utter full-on people. Yeah. The thought of taking it easy, but I was working really long hours and then going to the gym in the evening and just not stopping. And when I was ill with glandular fever, I just didn't stop. And you should.
You should.
When
I
your
had
body,
that. Yeah.
If you've had it.
And it forever affects your immune system.
That fatigue is just,
awful. So I feel your pain there.
Nearly 30 years later, my immune system is still slightly wrong.
Yeah.
So, but eventually I was still determined I wasn't going to get this work. So I went back to work after about a year. It was funny though. I went back part-time. So I was doing 3 days a week, and I was still top of the branch. My business level, and I wasn't really even trying because I was ill. So I'd go and see clients, and adrenaline gets you through all sorts of things. So my adrenaline would keep me going. I'd get home and then just, I have to sleep all the time. Yeah. But I was determined I wasn't. I think the thing, I feel so bad for those people who've got it long term, and some people do, because it can ease into depression. I'm a very positive person, but I could see how easily it gets you into that. If you've had glandular fever, you'll see that fatigue is awful. Yeah. But every day I'd try and find something to look forward to, even if there was a program on television that I would watch, or I'd at one point I used to manage to drive up to the village and go to the deli and come back, and I'd have bought myself a little bit of cake, but I got put on all these specialised diets and I tried everything and nothing would. But what did work is pacing, is doing a bit and then resting, a bit and then resting, and gradually it got. I'm being positive, and gradually it got better. But in the time that I was ill, Prudential going through loads of changes. So when I went back, 2001. And I was still part-time, they made us all redundant. They decided to close their face-to-face business. So I think lots of people had been made redundant by then, because they upped what exams you had to do. And I think by then there was about 2,500 of us, but we all got made redundant at the same time, which was a bit of a shock. Going from a really high point to absolutely the lowest point you could possibly be at.
Hello there. I just want to take a few moments of your time to talk about our episode sponsor, Salacia. I'm here today in their showroom, surrounded by just some of their beautiful bathroom products. So whether you're a homeowner, contractor, or developer working in the residential, commercial, or hospitality sectors, Salacia are your go-to for refined design and technical precision. Check them out at salacia.co.uk, and don't forget to listen to the rest of the episode. Thank you.
So I set up the business with 3 other colleagues from Prudential. So when we all got made redundant, one was my friend who was out having a drink with when I first got asked to be a financial advisor. Him, one of our other colleagues, and Michael, who is now my husband. So, yes. We won't go into that in too much detail. But no, so Michael, myself, and the other guys set up an independent financial advice company. We had no idea what we were doing. Well, we knew how to give financial advice. We weren't allowed to keep in contact with our clients so we literally started. I remember we all sat around in this office in this we were above a washing machine showroom with like this somebody else's secondhand furniture. We had no idea what we were doing. And we had these computers, and we all just kept looking at each other going, what do we do? But we just started going and seeing clients.
Yeah.
And then I started writing lots of business, and the boys were like, oh, and I was like, well, come on, you
chop.
need to go and do it.
Yeah.
But the week after we started, 9/11 happened, and we were sitting in our office, and I remember somebody going, oh, yeah, we had a computer technician in, and he said, oh my God, look. And we watched the planes flying to the things. And of course, the markets crashed.
Yes.
And so that was like, oh my word. So that was I mean, God, talk about starting a business when things are really bad in the industry. But we did, and we carried that on. My friend that got me into the industry originally decided after a few months, he was a manager. He had young kids. He didn't want to be self-employed. So he went off after 3 months and left the three of us. And then we carried on for a number of years. Michael and I were then together, having both gone through a divorce. So yeah, not a pleasant time at all for either of us, and really difficult, really, really difficult.
Yeah.
It's something that going through that sort of change is really hard. It was really hard for our families, really, really hard for our families. But we basically met the person we should have been with first off. Just we'd married the wrong people too young, I think. Both of us had. So we set, and then we carried on for a while, and then our other colleague decided to part ways with us. So it just left Michael and I, and so we ran the business together then so until we merged, 22 years. We ran a business together.
So you're in a new relationship.
Yeah, oh my God.
You've found yourselves as business partners, not necessarily by architecture, and you're trying to make this business a success.
Yeah.
That must have been quite intense.
Yeah, well, we'd known each other for years before because we were both at Prudential, but we didn't know each other very well. We just knew of each other and always liked each other's company. And he was successful and I was successful. But I mean, talk about throwing you into something you've no idea what you're going to do. But people always said to us, well, how have you managed to work as husband and wife? And one Michael will say, well, Lynne's the boss, and and if he does what I tell him to do, that it works, it has. But we were friends and we were business partners before we became a couple, and I think that helped. So, but yeah, it's been a huge challenge, and we were IFAs for a long time, and then we joined our company now. But working together, I know you do, Georgina. When you said you were leaving your job and going, I was like, we had a bit of a chat, didn't we? And I was like, yeah, good luck. It can be, it's wonderful when it works, because you've both got a common goal. You're there to help each other out if you need to do school runs and whatever. Because we'd obviously have kids as well. But you. And you have to try not to talk about it all the time. We used to try not to talk about it. You naturally do, but it's good. I mean, I wouldn't have changed it at all. It's tough sometimes because you can't get away from each other, and although in COVID it was quite good. We used to work from home. Everybody had to work from home, but we had an office and we were the only people in it. So I used to send them to the office, and I'd stay at home, or then we'd swap. I was like, otherwise,
just to get a bit of a break. Yeah.
But you just have to deal with it, don't you, and go through change. But no, it's been wonderful, and we still work together now. So it's been a long journey. I think it's 25 years we work together now. So,
gosh,
long time.
That is incredible. What an amazing story.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's funny, you talk back over it and you forget everything you've done. But from there, I then. We carried on with our practice again. We were very, very, very successful within St James's Place. And as we joined, the rules changed in our industry, and you had to go from being diploma qualified. Everybody had to be diploma qualified. We were already diploma qualified. So I thought, everybody's going to catch up. So I'm just going to go on and do a bit more. So I went on. So bear in mind, I've got a young child at the moment. So Michael has got two children. So they were 5 and 2 when I became their stepmom, and they're wonderful, and they've been a complete and utter joy. Although tough, obviously having a blended family in times, but we've been so lucky, and they love me and I adore them, and so that's really worked. And then we had Henry together. So at this time, I think Henry's about 5. We're renovating houses. I've got a baby, 2 stepchildren, running a business, and then I started doing my exams. And so I'd work all day, put him to bed, then go back and study.
Yeah.
And people kept saying, "Why are you doing that?" I'm like, "Well, just want to be better than other people. And I think that little girl from the comprehensive was told she couldn't do it. I was like, no.
You're determined. Yeah.
So I did, and I think I was one of the first chartered advisors locally in St James's Place, and I think at that point it was about 2% of advisors were chartered. So it was really fierce. That was 13 years ago. I then became a fellow, so which is even more exam.
Yeah.
So I'm fellow of the CII. So it's the very highest you can get in our industry.
Wow.
Again, that will show those teachers at my comprehensive school.
Yeah.
And then my clients were getting older, so I'd begun to start giving advice on care and giving advice in later life. And there's a specialist qualification you get called SOLA, which is SOLLA, or Society of Later Life Advisors. There used to only be about 300 SOLA advisors in the country, across the country, not just with St James's Place, everybody. It's one of the only qualifications I've done that's not just about your technical skills, but about your soft skills, about talking to people, about how to check if somebody's got dementia, how to make something they're comfortable talking about some really, we're talking about care, you're talking about dying, you're talking about some really serious conversations. And it was wonderful because that was what I loved doing, is that sort of conversation. So I became a SOLA accredited advisor. So I'm the most qualified you can get in the industry from a normal advice point of view, plus I have this. So I get a lot of clients coming to me because of that, because I've done it for a long time, 33 years now, and I do all of that. But yeah, again, and I've watched loads of my colleagues who haven't bothered trying to go for chartered, including my husband, because he was quite happy just seeing his clients, whatever. But I just was determined I was going to be just as good as I could be.
The best that you can be.
Yeah. And show the people that told me years ago I couldn't do it, that I could. So, yeah. So I do think if people put you down and you think, or you doubt yourself, just try and do it. I mean, honestly, I'm not the brightest spark there is. And I, as I said, I had dreadful education, but just try it and do it. And I've astounded myself over the years that I've managed to do all these things. So, I got a big award a few years ago, became Financial Advisor of the Year in the Southeast. It was in the Women in Financial Advice Award, so not across the whole board, but the women in this industry really try and support other women, and we try to get more women into the industry. So they have a Women in Financial Advice Awards, and I've been a finalist. Again, I was a finalist again this year for 3 awards. I've been a finalist most years. Every year I've entered, I've been a finalist. But the first year in 2020, in lockdown, I won Financial Advisor of the Year. And rather than a big award ceremony, you might remember there's a LinkedIn post of mine that's got me in an evening dress in my kitchen getting my award.
Excellent.
Oh, shame.
You got dressed up still, though.
Yeah.
I'm
One of my
impressed.
clients said, Lynne, you need to get dressed up.
Absolutely.
You would have got dressed up to go to the award, go and do it. So I did. So I'm sitting in a blue evening dress with drinking a glass of champagne in my kitchen.
So you've built this amazing business. You've moved that business into St James's Place, and that's building up. And then there was a big moment. Was it about a year ago?
Yeah, so we sold the business at the end of 2023. We know that we've got to wind our way out of this business at some point. You can't carry on being a financial advisor forever, even though the average age is 58. I think that's mad. But anyway, and we'd also brought our son into the business. My stepson's in the business, and we trained him up. I've trained lots of people up over the years to be advisors, and we need some succession planning for him and for our staff. So we spoke to another practice in St James's Place and said, would you be interested in merging? They're in Hampshire. And they said, yeah, we'd be really keen to open a Tunbridge Wells office. So they literally took us on and our staff, and we sold our business to them. So I've gone through the challenge of selling a business as well, which was pretty full on. So I give a lot of advice to clients about how to sell a business, because that's another challenge in itself. But it's been great. And I'm now advising as a self-employed advisor, as is Michael. They've taken our staff on. But that's been a bit, watching the business you've grown be passed on, and then sort of going, okay.
It's got to be tough.
Yeah, I can't make those decisions now.
Yeah.
And so it's been good. I was ready for it, but it's also been quite hard when you've been the one making the decisions for 20 odd years to suddenly give up control. So it's been good and not, but it's sort of almost then you get to the point of going, oh my God, what am I going to do? So
I was going to ask, what does your next chapter look like? Because you've done so much.
Yeah.
You're probably at danger of going, I'm a bit bored, but actually it's a good thing to be a bit bored.
Yes, yeah, and about time I had a rest.
Yeah, I was going to say.
So the idea when we sold to them was we would try and wind down a bit. But last year I had an accident, silly accident, playing with my dog, who smashed my head back, gave me whiplash,
God.
which has given me these dreadful, what they call we've now found out it's called vestibular migraine. So I'm dizzy constantly. I'm on drugs now for it, which calms it down. But I couldn't drive, couldn't look at screens for about 6 months.
God.
So that's good when you're a financial advisor. And
Yeah.
I was still looking after about 120 families, with the responsibility. So I said to the new company, I can't do this anymore. I can't. I don't want the responsibility every day of having to look after these people. So they've moved a lot of my clients onto some of my colleagues to look after them ongoing, which has been hard because some of them I've looked after for 30 years. It's been quite emotional. I've had some amazing emails and messages from them. Yeah, really emotional, because I've looked after them and their families for so long. But I need to do it for myself. But they want me to still look after new clients. So because I'm one of the very few people that is as qualified, is as experienced, female.
Yeah.
So they want me. So I'm very much out there to take on new clients who are going through perhaps change in their lives, who are going through divorce.
Yes.
They've been widowed. They're going into care. They've just been made redundant. They're setting up a business, just sold a business. I deal with, you're going to be talking a lot to people who are going through change.
Yeah.
That's what I've dealt with for the last 30 odd years. And so I'm going to be there helping people with their initial planning and winding down a bit. So going down to about 2 days a week now, not quite sure, but I have no hobbies because all I've done is work or look after my kids.
Yes.
So I like traveling, and I've always traveled to escape the busy life, but now we can travel a bit more. Right, we're going to go there because we want to go there rather than just, I need to go and lie on a beach and do nothing for a couple of weeks. So I've got a few little plans. I'd like to write a book. I've been thinking about it for years because there's a lot of things I know about what I do as a job, as financial planning, little tips, not advice, but just little tips about what you can do, probably through every stage of life, because literally there's things I know you should do through every. And my friends always go, "Oh, I didn't know that. Oh my God, you ought to tell people about that then." So I'm going to do that, and perhaps I might do some podcasts. I might do, I've got lots of stories of clients who I think my clients would quite like to be involved as well. I haven't asked many of them yet, but I think some of them would be happy to share their stories.
Yeah.
And do a bit on, on social media. I've got a little page set up already. I'm now going, you're the first people I've told about it, so I'm now going, oh no, I might have to do it. But
You have to, that's it.
if I find time, that's my plan, to try and write a book.
And you don't realise how powerful that is until you put it into a book and you go, gosh, there's so many lessons that have come from moments where you think, I can't do it, and you're driven by that backstory. We go, I absolutely can. And you mentioned to us earlier, the essence of what you're doing is helping people to get to a place where they don't have the clarity to know what to do. And we, I touched on a lot of it. There's fear. What if I don't do this? What if I do this? And I think there's something with helping people, because that's what you've been doing your whole life. And
that's been the best bit.
Exactly. And you'll probably migrate into that. I think to bring us to a close, we talk about the middle chapter of life, which we're both in. You've moved through and you're going into that sort of, I don't want to say later chapter, but let's call it that for a moment. Something I personally sit there and panic about is, gosh, what if the decisions I've made or not made now or in my 30s don't stand me well for when I go into that later chapter, because we don't have guarantees of life. We don't have guarantees that decision's going to end with XYZ outcome. What advice would you give to people if they're panicking, going, I've got to make all these big decisions now? Now you're sat in that later bit and you've had loads of success. But what if you're not sure what to do and whether it's going to be the right outcome?
Oh, it's a tough one. I mean, from my own experience and seeing my clients, so I've not just had my experience, I feel I've experienced my clients' lives as well, which has been really interesting. I would say, do get some advice, do get some financial advice, because the finances are really important, because you cannot slow down unless you've got your finances in the right place. Somebody said to me, well, if you're retiring, you're going to be retiring, I'm 57 next month, you're going to be retiring, fairly early if you stopped at. And I said, yeah, but I wouldn't be a very good financial advisor if I hadn't got my pensions in place and got everything in place and was still working when I was 70. That wouldn't be good. But so I would say definitely get some financial advice to make certain you've got that in place and do what you can, but just work hard, but don't kill yourselves. I've probably been a victim of doing that a couple of times, and don't do that. Find a bit of time for yourself. I haven't. I literally don't have hobbies. I read a bit and I travel, but I now need to explore some hobbies. Be a bit more like my husband was, who enjoyed his golf and definitely had some hobbies. So my client, and as you come up to slowing down, try and slow down rather than stop. I think I've seen that with my clients.
Yes.
The people who just stop is hard.
Yeah.
Yes.
But the people who manage to wind down a bit and do consultancy or slow down to a couple of days a week and build up some hobbies and things like that. I've dealt with a number of clients who've sold their business and are very like me and just a bit like, oh my God, what do we do now?
What do I do now?
Yeah. In fact, almost to the point I'm going to start doing something with some of them, I think, to try and build a group of us, because there's a lot of us.
Fantastic.
A lot of men have support groups, a lot of women don't. Of that sort of thing, and we're all having careers like men have, aren't we?
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
other thing I always state in your stage of life is you're trying to. I remember going to some of these St James Place dinners and things, and there was these really successful people. And I was like, "You're really lucky. You've got a wife." And yeah, I was the wife, but I mean, I'm really lucky. Michael does all the cooking, so he's brilliant. We shared the childcare, so that was fun. But you don't have, we juggle a lot as women, way more than the chaps think they do, but they don't always. And some are more helpful than others. I know. I was very lucky. Michael cooks, but I go and get yourself some support. One of them said to me, "Well, go and get yourself a wife." So I did. We've got a lovely housekeeper who she cleans and does the bedding and things like that. We do everything else, but that helped enormously.
Yes.
So get yourself some help. Don't think you can do everything, because you can't. No. So I think build up some support for yourself. Financially, help wise. Talk to people who've gone through it as well, because that's, I think what you're doing with this podcast is brilliant, because people are going to see because we all think we're the only ones going through it.
Yeah.
And we all think that, oh God, I'm the only one that's ever going to know. Oh my God, we've all got I've still got imposter syndrome all these years later. You still don't think you're good enough, and you still think that other people are doing it better than you.
Yeah.
And they're probably not. We're all. I think the more and more I've talked to women who are successful on the surface, we're all like underneath it all. So talk to each other, get a bit more support. I think you guys at your age will support each other more.
Yes, absolutely.
Even at my age, there's still not that many. I was still quite rare having such a big career. I think your age group will do a bit more. So midlife, get some help.
Get some, and you missed one. Buy your book.
Pardon?
Buy your book,
and
because there's going to be so much advice
honestly,
in there.
I'm going to be sending it out everywhere.
You've committed to it.
I think it's going to be called Secrets of a Financial Planner, but I'm
I
not
like
sure.
that. I was going to say, we'll have to cut that bit out. It'll be anonymous. Be all the stories.
Sure. Yeah, I'm going to be hold to it now. But I need to find some. So there we go. That's my new hobby, writing.
There you go, writing.
Amazing. And you can go on some nice holidays to do that writing.
Yes.
You need
can be
peace
anywhere.
and
Can go anywhere and do that.
Absolutely.
Which sounds good to me. Yeah, really good.
You've had an incredible life, and it's funny because as you were talking, I had similarities with school, and it's so interesting to hear from somebody who's not followed the typical path. You've hit a few bumps in the road, but I can hear as you're talking that positivity, that just get on with it, you're working out. It has been fantastic talking to you today.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much. We're really, really pleased to have had you on today.
It's been lovely, and quite therapeutic.
Yeah, good.
It's a counselling session.
We're here for everything.
Thank you so much, Lynne.